I was watching it with my girlfriend, and we both looked at each other like in shock. Our jaws both dropped. We were like, what?
Daddy's home.
We are here to talk about The Boys Season 2. This is, of course, Amazon's dark take on superheroes, based on the comics by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson. Personally, I'm a huge fan. I love the show. I watched Season 1 when it came out. I rewatched it again recently. And then because I figured I might as well dive in, I started reading the books as well. So now I'm 40-something issues into the comics. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I watched Season 1 in, I think, December, just rewatched it recently, but I didn't want to get spoiled, so I didn't read the comics because I love the show so much. I was like, if I read the comics, it's going to spoil things, so...
That's fair, yeah. It gives me a unique perspective when we're talking about the show, but at the same time, I've read a lot of things in the comics that I'm pretty sure I would consider show spoilers, so I'll try not to ruin anything for you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. But, with that said, let's dive right into it. Let's get into episode 1. It's funny. I didn't think the show could shock me that much compared to the season 1, episode 1, where Huey's girlfriend gets offed. That was like so shocking. And then they did it with Raynor. I was like, when that happened, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and we both looked at each other like in shock. Our jaws both dropped. We were like, what?
Did you like the episode overall?
I did. I thought it was great. It's it kind of furthered what I was thinking about with the end of season 1, where it was like, okay, now superheroes are in the military. That's not going to be a good thing. How are they going to show that? How are they going to handle that? And it didn't fully answer with episode 1, the Becca Butcher stuff, but it got into it a little bit because that was the real question at the end of season 1. What about you? What'd you think?
I just thought it was a great episode. Bottom line. I'm so glad the show is back. It's a really interesting show to have right now, this moment in history. This show about powerful people and powerful companies kind of doing anything they can, regardless of right or wrong or morality, to try to hang on to that power. I think is pretty relevant right now, and I think that we can talk about the first 3 episodes a little bit because all 3 of them came out at the same time with the season premiere, and I think that's kind of a major thread through these first episodes.
Yeah, and I guess something we should mention is that before recording this episode, we have seen the first 3 episodes, but we haven't gone further than that. So while this is a breakdown for episode 1, we have seen episodes 2 and 3.
Let's talk about the fact that the first scene of this season takes place at Vaught, featuring Giancarlo Esposito's character, who you might remember was in literally one scene of one episode of season 1. So I bet a lot of people who haven't watched season 1 in a while forgot he was in the show at all, because you probably know him from Breaking Bad and that universe. But he's Stan Edgar. He's Vaught's CEO, and with Stillwell's death last season, clearly he's going to have a much bigger role this season.
Yeah, like you said, it was interesting to start off with him, because I guess for me going into it, I was expecting them to start right back with the Becca Butcher thing, because that's where I was, as a viewer, so intrigued. But having watched the first
that cliffhanger was too juicy.
Yeah, but having watched the first 3 episodes, it makes sense that they would start with him, because he's such an important character, as we quickly find out.
Yeah, he's huge this season. Stillwell's death last season creates this power vacuum. Clearly, he's up to the task. We see him negotiating with all of these government, military officials, trying to figure out the exact logistics of getting the 7 into the national defense system. And those scenes are kind of juxtaposed with Black Noir in Syria fighting the soup terrorists. He's just mostly killing a bunch of seemingly innocent people. But that's not surprising at this point.
Right.
He's terrifying.
I guess we don't really know. Yeah, Black Noir is terrifying, but I also really like him. I don't know, something about him. I like that character a lot. Which I'll get into in a moment.
He doesn't speak and we know literally nothing about him.
I know we don't know much about him, but something about him seems weirdly innocent, even though he murdered all these people. Because there was this scene where Homelander's chewing people out in season 1. And he's like, all of you have f***ed up, except for you, Black Noir. You're fine. And Black Noir just kind of gives this innocent look, as innocent as you can look with a mask on. But he's just he looks so confused. He's like, what's going on?
When he sees the kid and he holds up the bunny.
Yeah.
That was like a little, I feel like that was more Black Noir characterization than we've gotten in the entire show up to this point. But it said a lot with that little moment. Let's talk about Translucent's funeral, which is So funny. Just an empty glass casket.
I love
All the pictures of Translucent as a baby, where it's just a lady holding up baby clothes with nothing in.
I was gonna say, just the fact too that we as audience members know that there's pieces of him when he exploded. So we as audience members know that there's nothing in that casket. Oh man, it's also like Starlight though. She refused to sell out at the end of season 1, so it's interesting to me to see her. I know she, like, at the end of season 1, she fell apart after the Huey thing, but like it was interesting to see her really take this turn. And like, you know, like throughout this episode, you see she's doing it for a reason, but at first take this turn where she's really selling out for Vaught. Like she really is doing whatever they want.
That's interesting because at the end of season 1, right, the last we saw her was she was intervening, rescuing Huey and Mother's Milk and Frenchie and fighting A-Train. And yeah, there was a bit of a jump from there to here. We don't know how much time has passed. It's clearly weeks or months. And yeah, she appears to be fully, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and fully on Team Vaught. Obviously, we learned that that's not the case, but, you know, it was unclear, is she going to go fully with the boys, or is she going to quit the Seven? And clearly she's picked this angle of remaining, you know, undercover. We get a little glimpse of the Deep watching from a bar in Sandusky, Ohio, where he's still exiled. But let's get into that later, because he pops up again later. For now, we finally get to Huey. And Huey this is sort of the third section that we get to in the episode, because we check in with Vaught first, we see what's up with Starlight and the Seven, and then finally it's like, where the hell is Huey? It turns out Huey has big fugitive energy, and he and Mother's Milk and Frenchie and Kimiko are living in the back of a pawn shop, I guess, with some literal drug dealers or drug smugglers. And it's not good. It's not good for them.
He's doing that horrible thing that I don't know if you've done this, but I've definitely done it, where like you see a photo of your ex with another guy or another person, and you're like over analyzing it. You're like, is that who they're with now? Like stuff like that, where you're like in that miserable phase when you first break up.
I love that. So he goes and when he meets up with Annie, and he's like, I saw a picture of you with Ansel Adams, who's like a 20th century photographer, and he's just being super condescending. But then the joke goes even further, because she's like, no, it's Alden Ehrenreich, who's the guy who played Han Solo in Solo.
You know, like another thing that happened was we do see where they are as they pull out, like what this hideout is, and I actually thought it was a comic shop at first, and then it turns out it's a pawn shop, but it looks so much like a comic shop at first.
Yeah, there's comics on the wall. I kind of viewed that as a little Easter egg to the comics, because there's a character in the comics called The Legend, who is not in the show. I don't know whether he ever will be, but he used to write all the comics for Vaught that told the adventures of the fictionalized adventures of all the superheroes, and he kind of lives or his hideout is in the back of a comic shop. So I kind of viewed that as a little wink.
So we also get more from Annie. Like we get the fact that A-Train's in a coma, so that's interesting. Like apparently he's been in a coma this whole time from his heart attack, and not recovered. So she's checking in on him. Kimiko is practicing writing so she can actually start to communicate with them. So,
yeah, I won't spoil anything, but I love what they're doing with Kimiko in the first 3 episodes, because her character in the books is just completely nothing. Just no characterization. There's like one issue where they tell the story of her backstory, but even then, Frenchie tells it for her, because she doesn't speak. She has no way of communicating. She has no name. She's just the female in the books, and so, you know, all of this stuff is welcome changes as far as I'm concerned.
And as you brought up briefly, Huey meets up with Annie in the subway, and what they're planning on doing is stealing more Compound V again, and this time, instead of releasing it to the CIA, they're going to give it to the press to try to go public with it to hurt Vaught, and that's the new plan.
Right. This tends to be the backup. I feel like this is kind of a trope, is that the heroes steal the information or whatever, and they go to the authorities, and then the authorities fail them, and so the next step is, okay, well, we'll go to the press and we'll expose it to the public.
Yeah, we'll take it to the press. On the subway, we get that whatever cult that the Deep is starting to get into. We get like a poster for that on the subway.
The Church of the Collective. I had to look it up.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some play on Scientology. But like,
100%. We'll get into that.
Yeah, right. But like the other thing that we got, which it's just like briefly shown, but there's like some things that are briefly shown that I think are going to be way more important than you realize. And this one is a Shockwave poster, and it's an article that says new speed record for Shockwave. It's like on a newspaper. And in the Comic-Con panel, they weren't revealing too much. They were revealing a little bit. But one of the things that they did reveal was that the speedsters were going to be kind of important, that there's multiple speedsters in this world as a power that people would get. So the fact that we're seeing another thing with Shockwave, even if it's just a background thing, and the fact that they mentioned that in the panel makes me think that this has to be an important thing. So we then cut back to the Deep, who's not doing well.
The Deep he's so pathetic.
Try swimming in the Mariana Trench, you little idiots. Yeah, not so fun now. No, it's dark and it's cold, and you're so alone.
It is so good. But then through this, he's arrested, and we're introduced to a new character, Eagle. Eagle the Archer, who's clearly a play on Hawkeye.
Even 100%.
The boy...
So you had a note, and I had the same note when I was thinking about it. It's like, why do they keep on bringing up Frescas? It's like constantly.
Right, what's with the Frescas? Maybe it's like how the Jonestown cult drank Flavor Aid when they all, died. Maybe the Church of the Collective has a thing for Fresca.
Mike, if you're right about that with the Fresca thing being a drinking the Kool-Aid thing at the end, like that will be such a brilliant prediction on your part. I hope it's that now.
Let's give a shout out to Seth Rogen's cameo, talking about the Translucent film franchise and the tagline for Translucent Invisible Force 2, you can't kill what you can't see.
I love it. I love it.
So good.
We also get the fantastic dramatic reenactment of Butcher and Stillwell. I don't know how they would have figured out so much with just seeing an exploded house. You know, I guess Homelander must have mentioned something about Butcher.
Well, as far as the official story is confirmed, was Homelander even there?
No, Homelander wasn't there in the official story, but like, how would any outlet know unless Homelander said something about it? Because why would anybody know that Butcher's there? Or maybe this is a plot hole that I'm finding, but why would anybody know that Butcher is there ever, period?
Suffice to say, the official story as far as the public and the authorities are concerned has become that Butcher killed Stillwell. It probably had something to do with Butcher's wife, who used to be a Vaught employee. That's the public story.
Right.
And it's close enough to the truth that the boys buy it. And as we see over the next couple of episodes, a lot of other characters buy it as well. There's a couple of other Easter eggs in this scene. First of all, Chris Hansen is the To Catch a Predator guy. So that was funny to see him hosting that. At the hideout where the boys are watching these news reports, Frenchie calls Butcher Monsieur Charcuter. I don't speak French, so I'm doing a bad job, but that's what he calls him in the comics. It basically means charcuter is like French for a butcher. What do you think about their argument about whether they need Butcher? You know, do we need to call him or not?
Who knows? I mean, Butcher is really a get it done type of person, so in that sense, maybe he does have connections that no one else has. So
yeah.
I think, like, for them to get out of the mess, maybe. It's just, it's like, you throw a bomb at... It's like throwing a bomb at a problem. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. Let's throw a bomb.
There's probably going to be some collateral damage at the same time, though. The next scene we see is Homelander at Vought headquarters in Stillwell's old office, going through her things, finding her old breast milk and heating it up. I guess he put his laser eye setting on low power. And just heats it up a little bit. And of course, Ashley, who has been promoted to Stillwell's job of kind of managing the Seven, catches him, and it's this very fun, awkward moment. The dynamic that Homelander immediately establishes with her throughout this scene where she introduces him to Blind Spot, who seems to be a play on Daredevil, obviously, another Marvel character. Another character not in the comics, as far as I'm aware yet. And who's not in the show really either, because he's just in this one scene. I don't know if he'll come back because now he's just some blind guy, as Homelander says. Homelander is he's made it clear in this scene that he is going to walk all over Ashley. He does not have the whatever dynamic he had with Stillwell, half mommy issues, half sexual attraction, whatever it was that caused him to, like, I don't know if respect is the right word, but he worked with Stillwell. He listened to her in a lot of ways. He's not gonna allow Ashley to get any sort of advantage in their dynamic.
He can do whatever he wants in his mind. So why does he always listen to certain people? So this is kind of what you expect to see from him, now that the one person who he would listen to is gone.
We're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, as Raynor says in this episode. The other shoe drops and it crushes us all. And the other shoe in this case is Homelander and any other heroes who think similarly to him, realizing that they don't need to listen to anyone. Like, the line between a superhero and a supervillain in this show is razor thin. And it really feels like Homelander could go full bad, subjugating the human race, and just becoming supreme leader of the world, ruling by fear and raw power, literally at any moment. Like, he might just wake up and decide to do that, and it doesn't feel like anything could stop him.
And yeah, like you said, it's a razor sharp line, which leads us to Gecko in a way, where Gecko's kind of like in that neutral area, where he's not like a superhero or a supervillain. He uses his powers for, like, honestly, to me, who cares? He can do what he wants. Like, in this regard with his powers, it's not, I consider it very neutral, but he's not a superhero with it. He doesn't do anything positive with it.
Right. Well, Annie makes a reference to, so she goes and meets this guy Gecko, and she's gets this information about him. She's gonna blackmail him, but she makes a reference later on when they're talking to the fact that he was a teen star. And I thought this was cool because in season 1 basically focused entirely on the Seven. And they're kind of the only superheroes that we find out much about besides Shockwave. There's kind of others on the sidelines, but in the books, the Seven are just one of a bunch of different teams of superheroes. There's actually some other really fun Easter eggs. There's the news scene later on, and there's on the sidebar there's mention of the G-Men, which is another team from the comics. There's mention of Swatto, who is another character from the comics. They give the name of the water park where the Deep gets arrested. It's the Splash Zone, which is a real water park in Ohio. And then they also mention Dawn of the Seven, which is it's like a Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, Justice League joke. But the movie that's in development comes up later as well.
Yeah, and another one that I like too is that Starlight's song, when she sees the thing on the TV screen when she's in the cab. It was going to be on Vodify. It's like, oh, that's fun. Instead of Spotify.
What was it?
They have all their like Vaught brand everything. Vodify.
Vodify? Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because there's also the Vaught News channel and all that. So we go back to the boys, and it turns out that there's another super terrorist super villain, whatever, who gets brought to the States, and Mother's Milk has to patch someone up, and he can't do it, and that's what they discover. We get a quick thing there where Kimiko actually recognizes an origami crane that means something to her, and she tries to explain this with her by writing to Frenchie in the worst possible way. She is terrible at giving clues.
I enjoyed Huey standing up to Mother's Milk. They've obviously they've all been stuck together in this horrible, stressful situation for a really long time, and they're starting to wear against their patience for one another is starting to wear thin. Huey's speech about how he's not a traditional tough guy, but maybe he's Harry Potter or John Connor or Katniss. I don't know who's more pathetic between the Deep and Huey. Huey has a plan, and he's been following through on this plan without letting Frenchie or Mother's Milk know. And it kind of works out, I guess. They managed to get in touch with Raynor. They don't need Butcher, I guess. Or do they? Because as soon as Raynor starts to put 2 and 2 together, her head explodes violently. And it's
oh my god, man, that's so
truly
shocking.
shocking. As you mentioned,
like
truly shocking.
Who? Like, you don't know anyone who has that power either. So that's the old initial things. Like, who did it?
It's interesting because it happens right when she says she's starting to figure something out when they mention the alleged soup terrorists that their friends have smuggled into the country, and she says something about a coup from the inside. And I've watched the scene a bunch of times. I can't figure out whether she's talking about a coup on the United States from the inside, as in Vought orchestrating a coup against the government, which you could interpret kind of as their plan for the national defense thing, and also would kind of bring in elements of one of the storylines from the comics that the show hasn't really done yet. Or a coup within Vought from the inside, as in Homelander's scheme of propagating Compound V throughout the world to create the enemies that they would need to take control. So I'm not sure what she meant there.
And I rewatched the scenes from season 1 with her as well, and like just to see what she knew and just remember for people who don't remember. So she knows about Compound V, obviously, and what it does. And she also, there's a moment where Butcher tells her that like about Kimiko, so they suspect that Vought is pumping Compound V into terrorists. There it is.
Right. Raynor suspects that Vought is because the timing also is crazy convenient for Vought, that the CIA, the government, the authorities are about to throw the book at Vought, and then suddenly these super terrorists pop up, and now they need Vought. And so the reality of where these people around the world have got Compound V from is irrelevant, because the reality is now that they need Vought to fight against them.
So going back for a moment, we do have to talk about Stormfront, because we get her introduction, because even though Homelander has shown that he can walk all over Ashley, somehow there's a new member of the Seven who shows up during the middle of a shoot for the whole like America's in charge or whatever, PR thing that they're doing
Their
for
marketing
Homelander
campaign, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Homelander thinks he's the head dickhead in charge, and that illusion gets shattered pretty quickly by Stormfront's arrival. And yeah, she's like basically a social media influencer version of a superhero. To me, this scene, there's biases and associations with all that, but I think overall her characterization in this episode and in the next one as well are meant to make us like her. She stands up to Homelander.
Yep.
She says things that Starlight only dreams of saying. While Starlight is totally just like speaking the company's messages over and over, and is it's an act, but she on the surface is completely on board, and she's terrified of Homelander, etc., etc. Stormfront doesn't give a and I think that we as the audience are supposed to find that refreshing.
See, it's funny because like I agree with the things she says, but the way she does it, since it's so brash and regardless of anyone's thoughts, it made me dislike her, even though I liked her what she was saying.
I want to point out a ton of Easter eggs in this scene. There are a lot. If you watch the usernames of the people who are commenting on her live stream, there's a ton there. There are usernames referencing Lamplighter and Ezekiel, who are other soups who we have either met or have been referenced. There's that report that Lamplighter has been cast this season, so he's probably going to pop up. There's a username called Maeve Beats WW42, WW42. For some reason, my brain interprets that as a reference to Wonder Woman 1984 because 42 is half of 84, and I just can't figure out. And Maeve is like the Wonder Woman character, and Wonder Woman 1984 is coming out soon. And I'm like Charlie and It's Always Sunny, like with the whiteboard.
Yeah, you got all the lines.
There's a couple of other
strings
references to hints about Stormfront because at this point I would maybe consider it a spoiler, so I won't say exactly what her deal is. She's based on a character from the comics who, if the show takes her in the same direction, and I think it will, people are anybody who starts out this episode liking her is not going to like her by the end of the season. But there's a reference to her earrings, which are lightning bolts, which, that's a symbol with certain connotations. One of the commenters on her live stream says Stormfront will rule the Seven.
But let's jump into what this leads to, which is Homelander meeting with Stan Edgar, which is a really juicy scene, I feel like.
Yeah.
I know that you noted about Congresswoman Newman.
So there's just the transition into this scene is another news. There's a lot of like news programs used as transition because they're good world building, and then you can go from like one character watching TV to a different character watching TV. Congresswoman Newman talking about Vaught not having this kind of authority or whatever. That's a really interesting one because I started Googling whether she had popped up before. No, this is her first appearance, but Deadline has a report that this actress has been cast for a recurring role, so we're probably going to see her pop up again. And they have her character name as Victoria Newman. In the comics, there's a character named Victor Newman, or as most people refer to him, Vic the Veep. And he's Vic the Veep because he's the vice president. He's a vice president who has been painstakingly installed in that role by Vaught over a scheme that has lasted decades in order to get somebody who's sympathetic to Vaught's interests and to superheroes in general installed in this position of power. That's a comics storyline that the show hasn't touched on, but for them to introduce a character named Victoria Newman who's a member of Congress seems like a pretty big hint that it might go, or it's just an Easter egg and it doesn't mean anything because this character, beyond the name and the position in Congress, this character seems to be the polar opposite of Vic the Veep in the comics.
So we get some really juicy stuff in this scene, though, which is the fact that we find out about Vaught's history. Frederick Vaught was got a doctorate from Munich, was one of Hitler's Nazi doctors who did those like horrible experiments on humans, and for him it was Compound V. Switched sides to the United States and used his now more perfected Compound V for the US on soldiers, and that's how Compound V started, and that's how the company started, which is, as he hammers into Homelander, it's a pharmaceutical company, not a superhero company.
Right, you're not as important as you thought you were.
Right. It's interesting to me because I was talking about why does Homelander not... Why does he just listen to people? It's surprising to me that here he walks away and Stan Edgar can just get away with this when really Homelander could easily murder Stan Edgar in his sleep for this, and he doesn't have any morals. So it's interesting that he doesn't care.
I think Homelander
well, he cares, but he doesn't do anything.
I think Homelander enjoys the admiration of the people, his position as this American hero. I think
right.
I think part of Homelander's character is his vanity. He believes he's a god, right, and he enjoys being worshipped. And so if he went full bad right now, he would be giving all that up. When part of him is content right now to continue kind of manipulating things. In ways that make him continue to seem like the hero. So
sure,
maybe,
but he just so clearly lost this fight.
Maybe he sees the logic of what Stan is. Maybe he sees Stan's point a little bit.
Yeah, that was a big L for Homelander, which is
that's true.
I don't know, always interesting to see. He goes back, visits Becca Butcher and his son, and all we really know this episode is that Becca Butcher is pissed at him that he showed up.
Yeah, we still don't really know what happened between them. you know?
Yeah, but before we weren't sure what her reaction was because she was more like intrigued and confused by her reaction, and now she is not happy.
When he
so
initially
it's a very
showed
different
up.
reaction. Yeah, when he initially showed up at the end of season 1, she was like looking like, what's going on? Like just really confused. I feel like
I interpreted that reaction as shock, really. That he was appearing, and then confusion that Butcher was there.
Right. So I say shock and confusion. Where here it's anger. So it's a different reaction that we're getting. So you can read what you want from that.
Butcher is back.
Butcher's back.
I have a question for you, because when he walks down this, you know, he throws whoever was guarding the door down the stairs, and he walks down, and he's just this larger than life, cartoonish figure. I in that moment realized how much I was missing Karl Urban throughout the rest of the episode without even realizing it. How did you feel?
I mean, I guess I was conflicted because I got Huey's point of view where it's like, oh no, like this is like the wild, like bomb thing that's like, oh man, this could be really bad. But also, yeah, I love Karl Urban's the best.
He's
Dredd,
so good.
Dredd's back.
He's so good.
I love Karl Urban.
I just feel like his presence is what makes this show what it is. Like, obviously, the whole cast is great. Homelander is so charismatic. Starlight and Huey are great. The rest of the other boys are fantastic. But I think Karl Urban's performance as Butcher is just what holds the entire ensemble together. And the show is so much more grounded without him in it. He's a cartoon. I said this in my review of the first 3 episodes, but he's a cartoon of a character. But I don't mean that he's not complex, because he honestly is a fairly complex character. I don't mean that he's two-dimensional, but he's just larger than life, and he chews up every scene. You know, every line out of his mouth is some laced with profanity, and his accent that's so over the top.
Butcher isn't with Becca. What happened to him? We never find that out in this episode. We don't really get much of the Becca stuff, which is the biggest question in this episode.
Right. What happened in between the end of season 1,
right,
and the beginning of season 2, as far as Homelander, Becca, and the Butcher situation? We don't know yet.
Who's the new soup terrorist? How does Kimiko recognize him? And then how is Stormfront going to affect the Seven is another huge question, especially as she's like so blazingly walks in and doesn't give a crap. So it's just like interesting stuff. So that wraps it up, episode 1 of season 2. Thanks guys for joining us. Definitely jump in for episode 2's breakdown, which should be up later today. I'm Dave Klein at the Dave Klein on Twitter.
And I'm Mike Rougeau. I'm at Rogue Cheddar.
And we will see you guys for the next breakdown. Later.